I think the big trend just in terms of LTE for 2011 is really commercializing it, right? We've spent a number of years preparing for LTE, talking about LTE, really explaining to operators why LTE is important, and now we start seeing traffic on the networks, right? We see the networks that were launched in 2010, the networks that were just launched in 2011. We actually see traffic on that, so operators can understand what can you do with those networks, how are end users going to use them, the business models. So really I think we've gotten to this commercialization phase, and that seems to be the big trend now of how operators are thinking about it. I think from, and we'll take this in the opposite direction, from a technical challenge, a lot of the challenges that operators are dealing with is how do you launch LTE, one, if you don't have the spectrum, right? I mean, I think we've seen some markets like North America where there is spectrum available, 700 megahertz spectrum or maybe the AWS spectrum, but a lot of markets like Europe in particular, the question is, where is this spectrum that we're going to find for LTE? Right? Many of those countries are waiting for the digital dividend spectrum to become available. The second technical challenge is really, how do you think about launching LTE at the same time refreshing your network, right? You have multiple generations of technologies out there. You have 2G, you have 3G. How do you layer LTE on top of that, right? How do you think about that as you're moving forward to LTE and to renovate your network? And then the business challenge is really around all of this is how do we monetize that traffic, right? How do we make LTE different? We've seen with 3G that traffic is growing, but it's growing faster than the revenues are growing. So how do we make LTE different? How do we make LTE something where we can actually monetize or begin to make money on the traffic that's flowing across the networks? I think the lessons that are out there from the launches that we've seen so far really revolve around a few things. Again, one is just in terms of the applications, right? What are the applications that you can launch that leverage LTE? What are the hot applications, the in-demand applications, things like mobile video, right? Mobile video is a great example because mobile video requires decent latency, good coverage, but more importantly, bandwidth, right? Bandwidth and throughput, cell capacity, as well as end user throughput. So it's the learnings of what are those types of applications that are out there that are probably the best learnings that are out there. Beyond that, I think you can take some cues from how these networks have been launched. What do you need in terms of backhaul? What do you need in terms of site planning? How will the technologies actually perform? So going forward, I think it's a good thing that there's a lot of lessons out there for the operators. So from a customer experience standpoint, the risk is really setting the expectations, right? The risk is you have an LTE network and someone gets used to the LTE coverage, but then you step down into 3G or you step down into 2G and the performance is very different, right? The other risks I think that are also out there are just risks in terms of capacity, right? It's risks in terms of, do you end up with usage really taking off so much that LTE helps introduce mobile broadband services, but it congests the network, and so you have a poor user quality. And ultimately, that's a real problem, right? Because if you have a poor user experience, that impacts things like churn. Churn impacts your bottom line, and operators have done a lot of work to build their names, to build their brand around quality, so you want to make sure that you maintain that. Obviously, there's also the risks of if you're operating a 2G network and a 3G network and an LTE network, how do you make sure that the costs don't skyrocket from multiple different backhaul networks, from multiple different packet cores, from multiple operations? How do you economize so that you can leverage, let's say, a single, not to use necessarily the Huawei branding, but how do you have a single operation system that can handle that? How do you have a single transport network so that you can run the multiple different technologies over that one transport network? Otherwise, it just comes back to the issue for operators of if you don't, I mean, I was taking a step back. I was actually pretty encouraged to see when the Huawei's annual report came out, how the focus on platforms and single platforms actually helped Huawei to grow its margin. The single strategy from a platform strategy helped Huawei to grow its margin. I thought that's really impressive. But I think the bigger story is obviously not for Huawei, it's for operators, right? It's for operators in terms of, if you know you have 2G and 3G networks you need to improve, but also launch LTE, having that single platform that can be upgraded. It's not just in terms of technologies, because you can obviously always deploy an extra base station somewhere, and you may have separate base stations for those technologies for capacity, but it's from an operation standpoint. How do you have one set of products for training, for stocking, for operations, one set of products that have a common way of handling backhaul, that have a common set of operations? In some ways, I think, as much as we think about single RAN as a technological innovation and that it's really interesting in terms of the radio access network, I think some of the biggest benefits are really from operations. Yeah, I mean, I think right now you really do see this opportunity with LTE to think about new business models, right? And we're firm believers that this is the right time when you're introducing LTE, because it is fundamentally a new technology. And I think as much as it sometimes is difficult to convey to the end users how a new business model works, I think they understand that with this new technology, you're maybe going to charge differently, you're maybe going to open up to new channels. And again, with a new technology, it's an opportunity for new channels to get in. So we've seen this already, right? You've seen from a number of operators that they said when they go to LTE, they'll look at new business models like tiered business plans, tiered pricing plans, usage caps. I think that we know that with this change, operators are looking at that. Does this also make an opportunity for a wholesale model? Does this make an opportunity for new brands, new channels to get in there? Completely. I think, again, anytime you have a break, you have some sort of inflection point, which LTE definitely is, you have an opportunity for new business models.